So listen, emotions are a tricky thing in a relationship, right? So nobody really wants to be in a relationship with somebody who's completely unemotional, but it's also not that fun to be in a relationship with somebody who's over-emotional. And since our emotions determine how we behave oftentimes in a relationship and can be either positive or negative in how they impact the relationship, I thought it would be important for us to evaluate what are some scenarios when we absolutely should not trust our emotions and behave based on them, and how can we actually evaluate how we're feeling about a situation in order to determine this is okay and I should trust it. That's what we're going to talk about today on Relationshots. Hey, welcome to Relationshots. My name's Eric Wooten. If this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. If you've not already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss upcoming videos. If you want a free guide to intimacy, hit the link in the description area below. If you're looking for a place to grow your marriage with other people doing the same, full of resources and live Q&As and community, check out our Altered Marriage membership. You can find that link in the description area below as well. So let's talk about our emotions, right? Emotions are real in a relationship. We can't have relationships void of emotions. But our emotions are not always accurate, and when they're not accurate, they can actually be damaging to a relationship. So if you'll humor me real quick, let me go psychological on you real quick. So in the field of psychology, the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy is at its foundation that how we think about a situation determines how we feel and ultimately behave in that situation. Cognitive, how we think. Behavioral, how we behave. What's tying the two together is how we're feeling about the thing that we're thinking about. So let me get practical on that. Here's what that means. If I incorrectly perceive a situation to be dangerous, the anxiety and panic that I feel are real, but it's not reality for the situation because it was not dangerous. If I irrationally perceive my situation to be hopeless, then the depression that I experience is real, but it's not based in reality because there's actually some options to remedy my situation. It is not hopeless. And I could go on and on and on with example, but you get what's going on here, that if I think wrongly about something, the emotions that follow that thing will be real to me, but they're not based in reality because I've inaccurately judged the situation. And so in this video, what I want to do is I want to give you 3 scenarios where I think you should not trust your emotions. You need to check them. You need to evaluate them. And then I want to talk about what it looks like to evaluate our emotions to determine, hey, is this a real feeling? And can I go off of this feeling and how I behave? That's what I want to talk about. So let me give you the first scenario that I think you absolutely should not trust your emotions in. Number 1 is you should not trust your emotions when they are tied to areas of emptiness in your life. So if you've got some areas of lack or emptiness in your life, then you should not trust your emotions when they're tied to these areas, because you're always going to be more susceptible to be more emotional based on what you feel like is missing in your life. You're going to be willing to overlook red flags in these areas. You're going to be willing to settle in these areas. You're going to be willing to think that a relationship is better than it actually is if as long as that area of lack is being met. And you're actually going to be willing to compromise your values in that area as long as that area of emptiness is being met. You're going to actually be willing to not require other aspects of the relationship that are important and healthy on behalf of, as long as this area I have of lack or emptiness gets filled, then I'm good to go. So you should not trust your emotions when it's tied to your areas of emptiness. The second area is do not trust your emotions when it's tied to areas of woundedness. You are always going to be more sensitive in your areas of woundedness, which means you're going to respond more irrationally and more emotionally when that area of woundedness gets touched. You're going to spend more energy and time guarding and protecting that area, maybe too vigilant at times based on that area. You're going to be willing to overreact in that area because there's a wound and you want to make sure nothing happens to it. And so when you've got an area of woundedness that has not yet been healed, you cannot always trust your emotions in that area, because you absolutely will react in a much greater way than probably the situation calls for, because there's something wounded behind that, and it's going to cause you to overreact. So that's a second area when I believe you should not trust your emotions. Now, this third area is more for those who are dating, although it can also apply to married couples. The third area of the scenario is do not trust your emotions when you're having sex with the person. Now, I did a whole video on 5 reasons not to have sex before you get married, but the reality is when you have sex with somebody, it releases hormones, and you believe that the relationship is better than it really is because you're feeling good in your brain about this other person. It makes you like the other person more than you would if you were not having sex. It makes you willing to compromise other areas of the relationship because you think that this is really what's making you guys connected. It makes you willing to overlook some serious character red flags in the other person, because when you have sex, then you feel connected and you feel generally good about the relationship. So in fact, if you ever want to test this and you've been dating someone, you've been having sex, then why don't you just go ahead and make the decision to be celibate, for the next month. And you will find out pretty quickly how that person reacts and how that person does and behaves when they're, quote, sexually frustrated in a relationship, when this area of the relationship that they may enjoy has been taken away from them. You get a pretty good look at who they are and what their character is all about. So that would be a third area that you should not trust your emotions, especially when you're dating. But I think even married couples, I know a lot of married couples who have dysfunctional relationships but have a lot of makeup sex and feel good about their relationship, but it's really not healthy and they're not dealing with some of their areas of woundedness they need to take care of. So there's 3 scenarios when I believe do not trust your emotions. Check them again, and make sure you evaluate them. Now, what does it look like to evaluate your feelings to determine, okay, are these realistic? Are these rational? And is this something that I can base my behavior off? So let's talk about 3 steps or 3 ways to evaluate your feelings to determine if they're okay. Step number 1 is name the feeling. Just sit with the feeling. What is it? What are you feeling? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling angry? That's a secondary emotion. So what's behind that? Maybe is it fear? Am I feeling happiness? Am I feeling insecure? What is the feeling that I'm feeling? What is it based on? Does the feeling that I have match the situation that I'm in? So really just sit on it, name it, think to yourself, okay, is this realistic for the situation I'm on? But you've got to name it so that you know what you're actually dealing with, because oftentimes you're like, well, I'm just mad. Okay, well, maybe you are mad, but maybe you're really fearful, and that's why it's coming out in anger. Maybe you've been hurt and you don't want to be vulnerable, and so you're just acting angry. Maybe you're scared about something. So we've got to be able to name the feeling, sit in the feeling, and really feel it before we could determine if this is a realistic feeling. And then step 2 is reflect back on the feeling. So ask yourself, have I felt this before? And in what scenario did I feel this same feeling before? And is this situation just triggering an old feeling based on a situation, or does this feeling actually match the current situation? Because oftentimes we have something happen in the present and it's not as big of a deal as our feelings would tell us, because our feelings have been triggered from a past scenario that are now coming into our current scenario. So sometimes we got to sit back and go, let me reflect on the feeling and figure out, have I felt this before? What was it based on in the past? What do I think it's based on now? Did it make sense in the past? Or if I'm feeling the same feeling and it was irrational last time, it might be an irrational feeling this time. So you got to name it, and then you got to reflect on the feeling. And then you got to counsel the feeling. You got to counsel the feeling. So you need to ask yourself, okay, if a friend brought this situation to me, what would I tell the friend? The friend said, hey, this happened and I'm feeling X. What would you tell the friend? Do you believe that the friend's feelings are valid? Do you think they're an overreaction? Do you feel that they're just dead wrong? It was funny. I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day. We were talking about, I made some comment about, hey, I actually took my own advice on something and did X in a relationship, and yeah, it actually worked. The stuff I said to other people actually worked. And so they start joking. They're all, what do? Do you look in the mirror at yourself and go, how are you feeling about that, Eric? And counsel yourself. which I've never done. That's kind of odd. But this idea of counsel the feeling is kind of that. Okay, let me jump on the other side and act like I'm my friend counseling. What counsel would I give to my friend? And then maybe that's the counsel you need to give to yourself to say, I think that's maybe an overreaction. So basically, you're kind of taking your emotion out of the situation for a minute to try to logically evaluate the situation. What would I tell my friend in the same situation? And that will help you evaluate it a little bit. So you need to name the feeling. You need to reflect back on, have I had this feeling before? And then counsel the feeling a little bit. Massage it, try to figure out what's going on. So there's 3 scenarios when I think you should not trust your feelings. And then 3 steps to evaluate your feeling to determine, hey, is this a real feeling based on a real situation that should impact my behavior, or do I need to dismiss this and act in a different way? So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you need a place to hang out with some other couples trying to grow their marriages, check out the Altered Marriage membership, and I'll see you next time right back here on Relationshots.